2 of episode 33 of Uncommon Conversations. My guest today is Adam Kirschifer, I think is how you would say his name. But
we were just talking, but the internet is unfortunately being a little bit troublesome. And so hopefully we can get this sorted.
What's going on,
All
baby?
right.
Hey, I'm gonna go to the other side. Give me just 1 minute, man.
No worries. You guys are getting a look on the inside.
It's a shit show. But yeah, so like I was saying, to kind of recap, but close that out too. Like I believe as long as you live a morally good life, regardless of what you believe in, you'll be all right. You know what I mean? But I do believe that the structure of the religious system is a little far-fetched and extreme at times. You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
And to be honest, like their views on, like, horrible topic to touch on because it's gonna be forever, but like their views on like gay or people who have gender issues, not issues, that can't be themselves for fear of being ridiculed for it. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, I'm a firm believer in live and let live. I mean, if you're gay, lesbian, bi, you want to marry a toaster, be unconditionally you. I don't care. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And I think a lot of that hypocrisy is what turned me away from actually being a structured religious person, if that makes sense.
No, absolutely. Yeah, when you institutionalize and like you said, structure the belief system or the religion or whatever, not only do you get lots of cultural, like the issue with Christians and the transgender community, like, doesn't make sense in any scriptural or like theological kind of a way that I can understand. Like you literally would have to do like what the boneheaded racists of former years would say, that like in the Bible it said that different tribes were not to mix in the Old Testament or something, and that or something to that effect, and like that means that like the races shouldn't mix.
Yeah.
And I'm like, that's a bit of a stretch. So like they could say like humans were made in the image of God, and he was made man and woman, and then you could be like, okay, so there's man and woman. Well, it's like, what do we, like, if we're arguing over whether or not like something other than male or female can exist, we know intersex people exist, so there's that. But even putting that aside, we're really just talking about how they dress, what they want to call themselves, and how they want to talk and sort of behave. It's a lot of like more or less meaningless aspects to humanity and to character and anything like that. So
Yeah.
it doesn't make any sense why they'd have this sort of stark issue. The homosexuality thing, that's a little different because obviously like that is in the Bible more directly. And you know, even with that, like my belief for the longest time was that most people in the church are only voting against gay marriage because they're asked to vote against gay marriage. Like,
Yeah.
you're asking them to vote and it's against their religious preferences, so they're going to pull the trigger one way, but in reality they're not like hung up on gay people being gay people living together or anything like that. Like there's no issues on that front. And even then, like if it was about the legal contract and not about the word marriage, pretty much the rest of this crap goes to the side, because it really is like arguing over, should government be in charge of marriage? What does marriage mean? Is it the religious marriage? Is it the legal marriage? it's a mess because government got involved, and they should, in my opinion, they should just pull it out. I think people should be in charge of making their own marital contracts, and as long as it doesn't
Yeah.
negate any of your human rights, like let people choose what they want to do with their marriages, and the government doesn't have to have an opinion on marriage in the first place.
Yeah.
But on the so it's an interesting thing where it's like on the live and let live thing. I'm very much in that camp, but I also recognize sort of what I was talking about earlier was that there is an ideal way to try to live as a human being. And so what I call that and what I think, and I think the Christian sort of metaphysical metaphors of it all sort of applies to this, is align yourself with the good first. And in order to do that, you have to believe that there is meaning in the world and that there is good and evil and that you can discern it, and then you make that choice. And people don't think about all those stages before they decide to be aligned to the good, but you have to take all that on faith. You can perceive a moral universe, there is a right and a wrong, and you have to act accordingly. That all takes sort of a faith from the jump. A lot of people will say there is no meaning in the world, and they'll become nihilists. And that means you're basically directionless. And if you don't think there is a good and a bad moral line, you're going to wander into the bad aimlessly, even if you don't mean to. And so that's why thinking about these things and caring about those things matter. So like, trying to bring it full circle a little bit with the transgender community, there is a question of like, yeah, you should be free to live your life however you want, but what is the best way for you to be living your life, and what, makes sense? If you want to like ask, so like if me and you are talking about someone else and they want to make sure we're using the right pronouns when we're talking about them, and they want to just completely make up the pronouns on top of that, like to me, you're an asshole. Like there's no other word for it. You're controlling. You're saying when people aren't around me and they're talking about me to other people, they need to use my special magic word. Like, I understand that you want to, and it comes also from, don't identify with the word. The word doesn't mean shit. Like there's this idea, I don't feel like what I think society thinks a man should be, therefore I'm not really a man or anything like that. It's like, no. Like, there's biological realities to being a man, and there's like behavioral averages and stuff on society. And then the rest of it's kind of bullshit. Like, the rest of it is just culture or whatever. And the real answer is reject it all, not try to go against the grain and just jump the other direction, or just try to jump in some random direction. It's just like the meaning of you as a person and your identity should not be in your skin, in your, name or anything like that. Like you can be a bad person and be any of those things. And so so like I have that acceptance, but when it's like, if I think about what I would be like in that position as someone dealing with those things, that's how I would try to think about it and try to deal with it as best as I can.
You also got to think too, like, yes, most of it is brought on by stuff that is initiated from that community, but they were attacked and persecuted so long, now they're just lashing out. Same thing that happened, like feminism. That's exactly what it's like. Women were persecuted for so long, now it's fucking horrible to be a man. You know what I mean?
Yeah, once they get back on top, the momentum and the energy is still there, and once the actual legal differences between the classes have been removed, and socially most people are just sort of accepting and chill, at that point you are just sort of like, you have the energy and the momentum, and you're kind of just bullying at that point. But it's like, okay, for the last 80 years we've been fighting for this right, and now that we have it, now we're bullying. Like that is a ridiculous sort of like, haha, I gotcha. Like, there should be understanding of these institutions and this momentum and this history and the context of it. But at the same time, you were born in 81, I was born in 94.
Yeah, two different worlds. Yeah.
So we can't, and also we can't be held responsible for anything that happened before. We literally didn't exist. So like you can't. So like, and it's so much of politics is word games in the worst way, because no one thinks that I, Jordan Farmer, am responsible for slavery. Even the people on the other side don't think that, but they sort of. The games and the actions and the rhetoric and the way we talk about it sort of feels that way, or tends towards that way, because they're being imprecise with their language. But at the end of the day, we still agree that like racism is bad. Any systems in the system that are holding people down are bad. And like, I'm not responsible in any direct way, for any of these institutions. If you think that, like, the thing is, most people don't think that. So even when I say, well, if you think that, I'm talking to three schmoes in, North Carolina.
Yeah.
Um, so, um, anyways, I just wanted to circle back a little bit to the concept of homosexuality and how the church deals with it, because I was on that track earlier. You create this crystallized, sort of rigid structure of this is the right way and everything else is the wrong way. But
Yeah.
the metaphor of a sin and sinners is an archery term, which means you are somewhere, you have the ability to aim for something, and you're trying to aim for the ideal. Not everyone's going to be in the same spot. Not everyone's going to have the same bow. Not everyone's going to have the same ability to aim. But it's about choosing, again, that alignment towards the good, and then aiming for that ideal, and then shooting and trying to get better and better in that process. And that is like, walking with God, living according to God's will, whatever it is. It's trying to live your ideal self as you were born to live your ideal self, whatever that means for you in your individual way, in your individual temperament and everything. And so the thing about the bullseye concept is there's one ideal, and then there's degrees of separation from the ideal. Yeah. And I like to take that metaphor one step further, where you can have the ideal and then suboptimal but still good for a long chunk, and then you get into bad, and then at some point, or you get into neutral, then you get into bad, then eventually you get into evil. And so I always say, like, you could shoot the target and miss by 3 inches, or shoot the guy behind you. Like, you could be a really bad archer, you could, and so,
well, and that's the
so
thing
you can say things like, so bringing it full circle to the ideal question, you can say, I think objectively, that being homosexual is not the ideal for humanity, because you can't procreate, you're not, you can't do that physically with your body. And so there are, in terms of like everyone acting according to the ideal and mimicking the ideal to perpetuate society, if the ideal was to be gay, we would all be, the human project would be over in a generation. But you can still say that it's not ideal, but not yet even neutral or bad. It's just not ideal.
Yeah.
And that room is where, like, the church has to sort of open the doors a little bit, because they got to understand that you can say you're against homosexuality and still let gay people in your church.
Yeah. Well, and it's not even so much...
And make them welcoming and feel loving. But,
yeah, well, and it's not even so much being against it. Like, everybody's conception of, yes, there is basically, you said, 1 degree of what's right and wrong, and there's 100 between those two. You know what I mean? But everybody sees it differently. So, like, what you would see as a good path for yourself from point A to point B might not necessarily see how I see it, because everybody sees the world differently. And I think that's what no one takes into account, that 90% of these structured systems say, hey, this is the only point, and if you're not at this point because I say it is, then it doesn't matter. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah, it's very rigid, and if you don't follow the... Go ahead.
And that's not even just with religion. That's with everything across the board nowadays. So whether it's politics, that's the way it is everywhere.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm a part of the generation, I don't know how long this has been going on, but I'm a part of the generation where everyone was told the only path to success is going to college after high school. And if you're not, you're going to be a schmuck working at McDonald's for all your life. And those were the options.
Yeah.
No talks about trade, no talks about business ownership or entrepreneurship, being an athlete, how to be like imagine if, like, the successful NFL players of 10 years from now were learning in high school about how they're going to make a bunch of money, and they should really invest it well so that they don't end up poor like most NFL players 5 years after they're out of the league. Yep. Instead, we're like, well, you got to go to college. And so they go to college and they party it up, and then they go to the NFL and they get a bunch of money and they're still partying it up. And then they get out of the NFL and they're still partying it up. And then the money runs out, and they never were taught the proper things. So yeah, even in the education I think in the education context, you can see it the most clearly, where it's like everyone is going to learn the things at the exact same grade level all the way up, and
Yeah.
you're going to take tests at the exact same time. You're going to learn from the exact same textbooks and teachers, and you're all on the same track to go to college, get a bunch of debt so that rich people can make interest off of your life, and then go and try and find a job to pay off that interest. That is the
Yeah,
path laid out.
and that is very big on the difference, because when I was coming up, that was the era of the blue collar man, the guy who went into a trade, the welders, the pipe fitters, the carpenters, like the people who built America. Because back then, and even 30 years before that, it wasn't necessarily about doing the best you could in a cubicle or anything like that. It was about being American and building America. The worst thing they ever did was differentiate worth of labor to the dollar bill. That was the worst thing they could have ever done. That's why the trades have gone down since, who was it? It was not Roosevelt. Was it Roosevelt? I think it was
Reagan?
Roosevelt. No, it was Roosevelt. It was just before that. But like Roosevelt, back in his day, he's the one who signed the original bill to, instead of tie labor to gold, which would inflate labor and make
Oh yeah,
rates and
yeah. That
everything.
was FDR.
Yeah,
Yeah, that was
yeah,
FDR. Yeah.
yeah. So I mean, and I think that's why trades have gotten lost a lot lately. But there's still people getting into the trades. There's just not as many as there was. That's why the quality of craftsmanship has gone down so much, because all the old timers that took pride in it, do everything, they're basically retired now, if not about to. And you've got the younger generation, which is like you guys or my generation, that have stepped in that kind of half-ass it. You know what I mean? And that's why another reason I'm grateful I was raised by my grandparents. They raised me with the old school morals that they were raised with. So that's almost why I don't fit anywhere, because yeah, I was born in 81, but I should have been born in like 63. You know what I mean?
Yeah. No, I can totally understand that. Yeah, I wasn't super close to my dad, except for a brief period of my childhood, like after the age of 5 and before the age of 14. So like it wasn't during the formative years, and I looked to my grandfather as a substitute. And interestingly enough, Jordan Peterson has said that is, like, in his opinion, the best substitute for a father, because it still grounds you. It basically just grounds you in a more wise, old school masculine, but you're still
Yeah,
getting a grounding in the masculine. The only trade-off is there's not going to be as much common interests, with that kind of an age gap. The
yeah,
father will have, a closer perspective to the modern times. But, I think I've been served by having that broader, older perspective. I've taken a lot of
yeah,
things much more seriously than everyone else in my peer group, from the
yeah,
jump. And it meant I was lonely and like a weirdo, not a weirdo in the sense that I couldn't get along with people, but I just wasn't interested in the same things they were interested in. So they were
yeah,
like drawn in a direction, and I was drawn to having a friend and drawn in this other direction. And
yeah,
so it's result, but for me, it's all served me. I really feel like my path has I've learned the lessons needed to be learned. So I had to go through what I had to go through. And I think it's all culminated to here, and it's never going to be like this. Life is all rosy, and I finally hit the
yeah,
point where everything's great. But I've definitely hit a mental health threshold and a productivity threshold, where I can sustain both over long periods of time. That has been very meaningful to me. That was the only thing I was cursed, and again, because of what I'm trying to do here now, blessed by the fact that I was unchallenged and very intelligent in high school and throughout
yeah.
all the school and all of my childhood. So I was told by everyone I had all this potential, but I was never really pushed by anyone
To use
to
it, yeah,
to try to use it. And so I had to develop that and backfill that part of it on my own. And so it meant it took 12 years or something, like from the time I started trying to fix that to the time I feel like I'm gaining some momentum. But um, like that learning those lessons the way I did, I think, like, ultimately resulted in, good things and everything. I'm happy
yeah,
it went the way it did, but it was a tremendous challenge too, to be, basically it made me both the constant underachiever, as well as like uh just uh beating up on myself all the time because like simultaneously I was drawn to things sort of different from everyone else, but I was judged by what they cared about. And at the same time, I wasn't being pushed and driven to be successful sort of in any direction. So I knew I didn't have it in that way. And so that definitely, just internally, I knew I didn't have it, and I'm honest with myself. So I'm like, that's not good.
Yeah.
And I had all this potential. And so it sort of made school and a lot of things when I was younger a little bit difficult and weird, but it all sort of worked out till the end. I was rambling a little bit there. I didn't know where I was going with it,
No,
but
you're good. You're good. And I completely relate to that because when I was going through school, I had the old school morals. I was hardened. That's the greatest thing I feel that I accomplished being raised by them. Not that I'm not sensitive, because as a man, I still have emotions, feelings, shit like that. But I was hardened in an old school way to actually accept life for what it is and not make people condition it for me with a false sense of security. You know what I mean? And
dude, that is foundational right there. You
yeah,
just articulated something foundational right there. Please continue.
yeah. And going through school, like all the way through fifth grade, I was the odd man out. I was very smart. And through junior high, I kind of was picked on a little bit, but I kind of let it slip because I was sick of being the odd man out, stuff like that. But at the end of the day, like eighth grade, my grandfather sat and had a talk with me about the differences in the children my age and me, and why I should be doing better for myself and not count on them, because I'm different and different for a reason. So all through high school, everything else, I was a straight A student. I did everything I could. Senior year, I left. I went to UTI Phoenix for 2 years to get my degrees. I did another 4 years online schooling after that. And I buried myself in the shop for 20 years. That's why I've been good at what I'm doing. Like, I always had that old school drive and determination that was somebody's like, oh, you can't. I'm like, oh, watch me. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
That,
I
that,
I didn't have anyone telling me I couldn't do it, and so that's its own thing.
yeah,
That's the you really can do it. You have so much potential. Why aren't you doing more? Not
yeah,
no, I don't think you could do that. And so I'm like, I never.
yeah,
It's a weird thing to not have that. To never like only now am I like frustrated by the fact that no one else is trying to do what I'm trying to do, or like I feel like I'm a loner here. Like that anger that festers from that is turning into motivation. So it's sort of been turned into a healthy thing. But
good.
but
Yeah, also your generation, like you're right on the cusp of where it went from wanting to earn that first place prize, wanting to excel and be over the top with everything and succeed, to where everyone was just the same. It didn't matter whether you got D's or you got A's, whether you placed 50th in a tournament or first. Everybody got the same award at the end of it. So there was no real reason for your generation to strive for more. Everybody was just complacent. You know what I mean?
yeah, we're definitely, my generation like feels like we're running off the fumes of previous generations,
Yeah.
and we're trying to change that. I think now is an era for changing that because it's a new time with the internet, and we're kind of getting connected to everybody in a new way. But um, uh, when I was talking to someone at a grocery store the other day randomly, because I just bring up politics to random people and say, "Oh, you want to learn this interesting fact about climate change?" Because this is me, this is my thing.
Yeah.
We were talking about how if you can reject like what everyone else wants you to do is to get to like here and to be just like them right here. And if you can not only do the healthy thing of separating yourself from sort of idealizing the hierarchy, but also you can set a much higher standard for yourself and do that and set the standard not from other people's average, but from your own setting the
Yeah.
standard. You almost always will aim and hit higher levels of success than if you're just trying to be marginally better than someone else in your
Yes.
group.
$100%.
And it is like it's a totally different way of framing what you care about. And so you sort of had that with your work ethic and being committed to those things that mattered more to you, and obviously resulted in a lot of cool things. Can you tell me a little bit more about your business and you working on cars and stuff? What you do
Um,
nowadays?
so my business is called Misfit Customs. I've built custom motorcycles from the ground up. I build the frames. I hand make the gas tanks, the fenders. 90% of the pieces on there are handcrafted for me, either out of tubing or sheet metal. I do all the paint. I do the pinstriping. Everything is one-off custom. I designed a machine back in 2002. Well, it was before that I started designing, but um, at about 2002, 2003 is when I actually had it patented and completed. So I've got 27 of these machines sold out across the country to different fabricators and builders. It's kind of like a mix between a automated tubing bender and a CNC machine. I programmed all of the software myself. So basically it makes building motorcycles idiot-proof. So say a customer
That's
wants
cool.
5 different style frames made, I can go in, I have to hand build it to their specs at first, input the specs into the software, but then all they have to do is go punch it, it comes out, it's bent, it's notched, and all the people have to do is just weld it together. It's basically an erector set at that point.
That's cool. You IKEA'd building motorcycles.
Yeah.
That's
Well,
cool.
and it wasn't even just that. I thought about it because even once I retire here in a few years from building for bigger companies, everything else, and I'm just going to do private work, for years to come, those machines are going to need new software, new programming. They're always going to want more and different things. So all I did in turn was create more work for myself in the future, was the way I saw it.
Yeah, I mean that's brilliant, bro. Like,
Yeah.
there's no other way to put it. That's brilliant. Because yeah, that's cool. I wanted to be an inventor actually when I was a kid. That was like people want to be a fireman, an astronaut, or whatever. I
Yeah.
wanted to make new things and do stuff. And I have a lot of entrepreneurial ideas and a lot of actual technological ideas that I'm going to be diving into in the next few years. But I was sort of wandering formlessly, and then around 2018, I learned enough about politics and certain key facts that it made me realize that I had something unique to add to the conversation.
Yeah.
Like, and in terms of like policy stuff and data points, not even like I had some grand narrative or philosophy about how this is all supposed to work. And so when that happened, that sort of is what got me on this track of talking about politics and wanting to participate, because I feel like if I can contribute something, you know, like invent new things or at least just offer new perspectives or questions, like I it was the first thing where like it was my interest and passion, and then it sort of started to wane off, but it
Yeah.
was so important that I had to stay committed to it. I couldn't let it go. I couldn't just move on to some other part of my life and say, you know, these things that'll help humanity and like people politically get along and solve problems. Fuck it. I'm just gonna go talk about, you know, cryptocurrency or whatever it is. You know, I couldn't let it go, and then it just grew and grew, and then I did the damn thing the right way. I went on a website, found all 50 topics that people debate on politics, and just spent, you know, a couple of years trying to write it out, research, figure out facts, and take a political engineering approach instead of a political science approach. Because the political science just tells you what is, and it's studying what is, and it's sort of gathering the next fact. But
Yeah.
engineering is taking all that knowledge and turning it into
something.
useful
Yep.
something. And
Yep.
so and so I've been on that track since. But once I have an ebook I'm going to be trying to get out soon. Once I get the groundwork laid to make this sort of a more manageable part-time gig, I'm going to start going into these other areas of interest for me. But yeah, so I wanted to be an inventor as a kid, and I think it's really cool that you invented something and that you patented it, and you got to do that. There's I mean, that's America right there, dude. Like,
Yep.
like the fact that you can make it and get to keep the rights to it. You know, in China,
Yep.
that belongs to everybody else now.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
They literally, like, in their laws and legal systems, are communist, meaning there's no personal intellectual property, and even physical property that you own is sort of at the discretion of the government. So,
Yeah.
and only for you can, and we have a little bit of that too, where you have where they can bulldoze down property and make it into freeways and stuff. Eminent domain. I was trying to think of that phrase, but we have a version of that a little bit, but not quite to the same degree. But anyways, I just think that's super cool, man. I'm geeking out.
Yeah, I'm excited. And then like the best advice I can give you, how's it going, man? never stay in your comfort zone. If you get comfortable or complacent, you're sitting too long. You know what I mean? Always stay a step ahead and just outside of your comfort zone.
Well, thank you, man. I appreciate that. I definitely have been working towards that and struggle with that / and making good progress on that front right now. I this whole political thing is out of my comfort zone. Not talking about topics or talking with, like, not the ideas part and not talking to people, but being a public figure and trying to carry the load of a page on Instagram where I have people messaging me and I have to have answers to questions and stuff like that. That is all out of my comfort zone. And so that you know, I have moments where the weight gets a little bit much, and then I figure out how to relieve some tension or do whatever I got to do. I was just in the last podcast I was talking about, in the last 24 hours, I had a moment where I just broke down crying because I was almost hopeless. I was like, what if all of the work I'm putting into this politics stuff doesn't do it? What if it doesn't work? What if it all fails? What if, you know, really bad things happen? Because we're in a terrifying era right now. Like, there's things that we are facing right now that are, you know, haven't been faced in 70, 80 years. But the truth is, and I believe this wholeheartedly, that what will keep the worst at bay is the fight. And so until that last day when, you know, Jesus is coming in on a chariot or whatever it's going to look like, you know, we got to do what we can do in the meantime. And I'm not, and the thing is, like, it's like emotional moments of weakness, but my resolve is rock solid. My path isn't changing. It's just, you know, I'm going to cry in the background once in a while, but that's, you know, that's how it is. That's how it is.
Well, and I mean, in the same respect though, too, just tell yourself you miss 100% of the shots you don't take. You know what I mean? Whether in 5 years it works out for you or it doesn't, you'll never be able to say that you failed because you gave up. And even failure isn't failure. It just didn't work this time. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'm true. Do you listen to Dan Pena at all?
Not really much of his stuff, but
okay. Yeah, that was that quote right there. You miss 100% of the shots you don't take. I've heard that from a few people now, but I heard that from him first. So, but yeah, I mean, it's absolutely true. And just doing it however I can and trying to improve. It's kind of like weightlifting or anything else, just improving my game on its own. Yeah. If I can make that the reward up here and, like, make that feed itself, then that's the right way to go about it. And I think because I struggle with these things and I'm willing to talk about them, maybe it can serve a purpose to let other people know, like, even if I'm Mr. Obsessed with politics and want to talk about this all the time, like, you know, life is real.
yeah, you're still human.
Just to sort of back up the claims, because I usually, when I say, oh, I had unique ideas, unique to me, and no one else had them, blah, 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 I usually talk about a couple of them after that. One of them is, typically you'll argue in politics over raising taxes or lowering taxes, and it's an eternal debate. If you raise taxes and you spend it the right way, it creates the right sort of long-term infrastructure growth or whatever. Or if you lower taxes, people have more of their own money to spend. That creates more activity on the private side, and that grows the economy. And the truth is, there's evidence to show that both is true. So there's a term or a curve called the Rahn curve, R-A-H-N, which compares government spending as a percentage of the economy and the growth of the economy side by side. And what it showed is, as the government goes from 0 to 25% of spending of GDP, so as they spend more and more up to 25%, it helps the economy grow. And that sort of, if you think about it as courts, military, roads, basic infrastructure, police, like, that's just laying the groundwork for a capitalist system to work effectively. If we're in war-torn Nigeria and you create the invention you created, and then warlord down the street comes and just takes it from you tomorrow, you're not going to make anything. What would be the point? Exactly, and so you have to have that stability. And then once you hit 25, 30% of GDP, it levels out at about 6% growth on average, which, if you know anything about GDP numbers, that's pretty stellar.
That's substantial, yeah.
And then after 30%, it starts to have a diminishing effect where it pushes growth back down. So it's like a pyramid type of a deal. And we're at, before the pandemic, we were at like 38, 39%, which would predict about 2.5% growth, which is kind of where we were at. The era where we had the best growth in the United States was from around 1935, 1940, up to 1971. And if you look at the chart, I have it on my page. If you look at the chart of government spending as it went up over the centuries, during that era is when it was between 25 and 30%.
Yeah.
Which is kind of cool. It's like another point of validity. But just looking at it that way and having that data point to say, okay, we at least have this range. And then I say, if you're a human being that owns yourself, meaning you're not a slave to other human beings, as much of your money as you make that you can keep, you should. So within that range, I go to 25%. Yeah. And then there's an answer. And then we can move on to the next discussion of progressive taxes or flat taxes and stuff. And then on that point, yeah, I inferred a whole third category of taxes, and I had never heard the word before, regressive taxes. Like if you can have taxes that are progressive and flat, yep, it makes sense that there would be some sort of a conceptual reflection of that. And it is. And sales taxes, sin taxes on cigarettes, anything that makes goods or services more expensive is a regressive tax, because it's making that increase in cost means more if you have less dollars as opposed to more. And that, once I saw that like possessed my mind for months, because I started, looking at the cigarettes, looking at the gas prices, and imagining, what if that was 43 cents cheaper? What if that pack of cigarettes was $7 less? Meaning, what if the mother who is smoking because she's dealing with being a single mother of 3 kids and working 2 jobs had an extra $7 per cigarette pack to put towards her kids? That's what it means. That's what it actually means. But instead, it's like, well, smoking is bad, so yeah, we'll tax those people more. And and then it also gets to things like property taxes. If it costs money to own a piece of property, then it makes it more expensive to own that piece of property, and it puts it a little bit more out of the reach of people. I sort of understand in the old tax system why that was necessary, and why, even if you wanted to get rid of all other taxes and just make, like, that would be kind of a good flat tax of sorts, would be a property tax, because it's like, if you own the property and you own the land and it's worth a lot, there's economic activity taking place, you'll have the wealth and you'll be able to pay it. And it's a way of it is sort of a progressive one, because you have to be a property owner before you start getting taxed. But anyways, so regressive taxes was sort of another thing. And then on the global warming front, I years ago, I thought, okay, some amount of CO2 that's going into the atmosphere is humans. And then I heard that we were accelerating the rate at which the oceans were putting out CO2. And so I was like, so some amount of it is also what nature's doing. And so if we have to fix having too much, we can't just get rid of what we're doing. We have to go beyond that and get rid of all the backlog stuff. Yep. And so I was like, okay, well, how much, what is the percentage here? 5% of all the CO2 emissions that go into the atmosphere and come back down are what humans are doing. We're only 5% of it. And so if you wanted to reduce human CO2 emissions to fix the problem, you're only solving a small portion of the problem, and you're really hurting humanity. But if you increase nature's absorption rate, well, then it's a lot easier to do, and you don't have to hurt anybody economically in the interim. And if you had a tax credit that made the farming industry and agriculture go from 2D to warehouse farming and 3D, that would pull back our 2D footprint and allow forests to come back and reoxygenate the atmosphere. So that's like bringing it full circle to the solution. But it started off with, well, everyone else is just talking about whether or not climate change is real. Let me go see how much of the CO2 is what, and actually break down the numbers and get all the way into it. And and so things like that made me realize, okay, I got to start talking about this stuff. I got to get into this stuff, because it's not just the same. It's not me just repeating the same bullshit that you hear from either side that people want you to repeat. And I was going to ask you about that. In your life and the people around you, what does the political conversation look like, and to what degree? Like, what does it mean for you, and what does it mean for them?
Well, give me 2 seconds. I'm going to walk out back where I have a little privacy so I can actually be honest.
No worries. No worries.
I mean, so, well, hold on. I'll just 2 seconds.
There's no rush. There's no rush at all. Trust me, everyone here that's watching is plugged in and doesn't mind if you take 10 extra seconds.
So when I was raised with my grandparents, my grandfather was always more um, conservative than any. You know what I mean? So that's
Mhm.
how I was raised. But then you have his 7 kids that were very entitled, very different. So half the family is liberal, half the family is conservative. My grandmother, my grandmother didn't always agree with conservative. She saw valid points in all of them. So she's partial. It's like she didn't vote for Trump when he was in office, but she didn't know everything that she did because she was so unplugged. So I look like the nutcase of the family with my more conservative views, whether I'm Republican or not. And it makes for very interesting conversations, but especially now in today's day and age, what this administration is doing, I don't look crazy, and I'm excited about that.
Yeah, yeah. The contrast in the last administration and this, and getting to see how a guy can be. You know, we learned this lesson before with Jimmy Carter, but a guy can appear. Now, here's the thing. I think Joe Biden's a sociopathic, evil piece of crap. But putting that aside, he appears to be a very heartwarming, wants to talk about, his son that died and his wife that got in the car crash, Joe from Scranton. And you can see that even from their conception of him being this honorable guy and this great guy, that he's seriously screwing some shit up.
Oh
Even
yeah,
just with Afghanistan. Even just with Afghanistan, you don't have to get beyond that. You don't have to get into his mental decline or
yeah,
like at this point, like in 2021, in 2017, 2018, the catch up was like this much, where you talk to someone and you're like, oh, we disagree with this and this because I looked into the origins of the Russia Trump investigation and realized that there was it was political research or political, what is it, oppo research that
yeah,
led to that, and it was kind of BS. And so a bunch of other people 3 years later, when the Russian investigation basically found that there wasn't any substantive ties there, they were all like, what? And then quiet. And I was just
yeah.
like, yeah. And then I'm like, wow, you guys went quiet quick.
Oh yeah,
Like, you
yeah,
just stopped talking about it. And there's a bunch of people that are unplugged and that would be like, oh, yeah, we heard about that Russia stuff for like 3 years. What happened with that? And then you got to be like, well, it was all bullshit. And then stuff like that. So, like, at this point in 2021, I was talking to a family member of mine, and I was trying to play the patient game and trying to we talked about politics briefly at like one random birthday dinner thingy, and she asked me, okay, so who are you going for before the 2020 election? And this was during the primaries, and this is what I was able to get out. Well, my number one choice would probably be Andrew Yang, and she was like, but he has no chance of winning. I'm supporting Joe Biden. I think he can really win. The following statement was going to be, but if he doesn't make it, I'm going for Trump. Like, Trump was my second choice.
yeah,
She didn't even conceive that would like be on the plane. And so months later, we started having a real conversation about politics, and she immediately started dropping hatred towards Trump and Trump supporters, talking about how people used to be a Trumper and used to be this, and like they think this way and whatever, and literally saying things like Republicans hate poor people and stuff like that. And I was just like,
yeah,
okay, if I'm going to have this conversation, it's going to be a long one, and I'm going to have a lot of patience. And so literally months went by, multiple conversations through text and in person. And she's the kind of person who's never had her mind changed by anyone. And according to the other person in the family that told me, she did change her mind on some stuff. She's told me that herself, actually, too. But it was a revelation to the other people in the family that could happen. It wasn't a revelation to me. I'm like, just get me in there with her for a bit and I can figure it out.
yeah,
But but it got to a point where I was like slowly trying to trickle her perspective into like getting more informed. And then Joe Biden sent out the mandate. And at
yeah,
first I didn't realize there was the testing exemption for it. So I thought it was just a mandate straight out. And so I was sitting there at home having an existential crisis, like, this is like the totalitarian moment. This is when the shit really hits the fan. Now,
yeah,
we've had
yeah.
legal pushback, and there's been stuff that's happened since, and luckily the shit did not hit the fan. But I had to have a conversation with this person just to say, like, first off, I'm a Trump supporter. So all that time you spent insulting Trump supporters, yeah, you were insulting me to my face, just so you know. And then also, this guy who you voted against because of some stupid ass reason that they called, this is Larry Elder with the recall election in California, that literally they called the blackface of white supremacy. Yeah, he wasn't actually the blackface of white supremacy. He's actually like the best hope this state has had in decades. And
Yeah.
it makes me sick to my stomach that you guys voted the way you did because you guys were being told to vote the way you did.
Yeah.
You did not think about it for yourself. You did not look into the man. And I've been following Larry Elder for 5-6 years now, and have picked him out years ago as the guy to run. So it was like, as like your triple A class superstar super champ against a numbskull, and then they're like, well, he's actually terrible, and this guy's great, and then people like believed it, and I was just like it hit me different because of the investment that I had in Larry Elder and the genuine belief I had in how much good he could do.
Yeah.
But that mandate, when the mandate came from Biden, I had a conversation with him, and I basically just came clean, and I said, so I'm a Trump supporter. I disagree with this stuff, and this mandate thing is a line for me. I don't draw lines in politics very often. I'm very open-minded. But now you're saying you have the right to make someone inject something into their body, or they don't get to participate in society. And even if you don't think we're there yet, we're 2 steps away from that, and it's been going that direction. And anyone that isn't picking up on the fact that it's going that direction is not paying, is to me just blind.
Well, but we are very much there. Look at all the people who are losing their jobs, careers they put thousands of hours and got degrees and spent their whole life building, that are having to walk away for something that's being forced on them. We're very much there. It might not be as severe as it could have been, but I mean, it's still very severe. And then, so what's the next step of extortion from the government? These people that are now out of work, what if you're not vaccinated, you can't have social resources such as unemployment or healthcare or anything like that? Like,
because you have to quit. You can't, you're not getting fired, you're quitting.
Exactly.
And so, yeah. And the idea that doesn't do harm to people, it's like first off, this gets me a little pissed off. When you think about all of the bullshit that Democrats and left-wingers talk about when it comes to poor people and how evil all this shit is, and then the second they get an opportunity to force you out of your job, and not get unemployment or anything like that, which means eventually you find a different job or you starve.
Yeah.
And they're cool with that, and they think it's like a non-thing because you might get a flu. Like you might get a really bad flu, therefore this person gets ostracized from society.
Yeah. Well,
like, go fuck yourself. I have no other words for that. Go fuck yourself 3 different ways from Sunday.
I agree. And I think that's the problem with any type of politics today. I don't care if you're Republican, Democrat, whatever the fuck you are. Nobody is in a place where you can hear each other and agree to disagree or find a common ground. And everybody, half the country is awake and seeing what's going on, and the other half just follows blindly, like they're a dog sniffing another dog's ass. It's ridiculous. And then even on my page, like I'll try and have a healthy debate with somebody, because like if you've seen my page, there's not one actual pro-Trump thing on my page. There's not.
No. You avoid that intentionally and like the plague.
Exactly. Yeah. Well, and not like the plague, because I don't claim Republican or Democrat. I go for what's best for the people. Yes, 90% of the time that's the Republican point of view. Not gonna lie. If I had to classify myself, I would definitely be a Republican. But anyone who is from the left side that ever comes onto my page, the first thing they do is they either attack or call you a Nazi or a Trumper or this or that, or they ask you to make 2 valid points. What civil liberties have you lost because of this? I make the points, and then they talk shit, completely avoid it, call names. It's all petty bullshit. And I think that's the tactics that politics is mainly resorted to now. If someone doesn't have the same views as you, they just attack you. They're not willing to have an open debate to maybe even see if there is common ground or some educational purpose that you didn't know to begin with. You know what I mean?
Yeah. And there's It's interesting. You don't even have to actually say what your opinion is in order for people to classify you and begin to attack you.
Yep.
You just have to signal, like people do this on both sides, but maybe because I'm more so I call myself an independent and moderate because on issues like gay marriage or drugs, prostitution, when it comes to things where I think freedom should still apply, I deviate with conservatives because they seem to just not care as much about freedom in those areas, which I think is a hypocritical thing. So that's a different debate.
Yeah.
But I really do try to be independent in anything. But right now I'm center right aligned, no questions asked. I'm a Republican right now, no questions asked.
Yeah.
I can't find a single Democrat I would vote for right now. Like Andrew Yang was my best choice, and then he said we should share our AI data with China, and and then also totally sold out to, like, MSNBC cut him off of, I don't know if you remember this during the primaries, Andrew Yang would poll at 9% and Kamala Harris at 1% and Elizabeth Warren at 2%, and he wasn't even on the list of people polling. They would just keep him off so people wouldn't see him. SNL did a skit where it was like, I gotta step back for this, where they had Andrew Yang being like, yes, we're gonna give everybody money, ha 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 ha. That's how they talked about this brilliant man with totally unique ideas.
Yeah.
They dismissed him, they ridiculed him, they made a joke out of him, and literally a bunch of people voted for Biden because CNN told them that that's who had the best chance of beating Trump, except for Bernie, because Bernie had a better chance of beating Trump, but, Bernie, is the evil socialist, not the only guy in the Democrat Party who's only semi-corrupt.
Yeah.
Because here's the thing, in 2016, I voted for Bernie in the primaries, and back then, and so this is where, like, if you don't have the balls to call out bullshit, I can't elect you as a leader. Like, obviously, that is a huge fatal flaw. Bernie spent 6 months telling us how Hillary Clinton took $250,000 speech fees from banks and voted for all this horrible crap for the country and was obviously corrupt and sold out. And then because he hated the billionaire dude more, told us to just go vote for her immediately after that. Like, once he lost, first off, he got screwed out of the primaries in, like, in objective ways, and the DNC emails, as well as, like, the way the delegates were put out. Like, they did this thing where the delegate would go to whoever got the loudest yell in the crowd, and then the loudest yell in the crowd by, like, a 2/3 margin was for Bernie, and they still gave it to Hillary. So I watched a video of that, and then saw the DNC emails, and I was like, this is corrupt as shit. And then Bernie was just like a cuck for it, like, just willing to just take it. And I was like, okay, I cannot, like, you're corrupt to me now. Like, if you are complacent in corruption, you're corrupt by de facto corruption. It's just that's the way it works. So, even with Bernie, like, he was like a semi okay option, and even then I'm like, I really wouldn't support him anymore. But anyways, I don't know where we were starting with this, but I want to circle back to that conversation I had with a family member, where I finally told him all this. Oh, no, wait, no. We finished that story. Sorry, we brought that to resolution. Anyways, you can't have, we were talking about your TikTok and how people will sort of attack you even if they don't know anything, or haven't, like, looked into your views. It's very much like the left will signal, like, low-key things to basically say I'm a liberal without saying I'm a liberal. Like, I listen to NPR is the number one. If you say you listen to NPR, that's translation for you're a Democrat liberal, like that. Because it's like, I've listened to NPR and I turned it off after 10 minutes because it was a mixture of nothing and a little bit of propaganda. That's pretty much what it was. Like, I felt like I got the juice wasn't worth the squeeze. I'd have to listen for so long to get anything of meaning, and I could go watch some videos on YouTube in 20 minutes and then go look up some data in another 20 minutes and then go think about it and formulate my ideas and write them down for 20 minutes. And in an hour, I've made, 5,000% as much progress as I would if I listened to NPR for an hour. So it's just not worth anyone's time. But anyways, stuff like that, they signal that to people. And so you don't even have to have your views out there for someone to be like, no, it's the anti-racist thing. You're not anti-racist enough. Literally, they're saying, like, you're not actively being an activist enough to justify not being a Nazi Trump supporting cow.
Yep.
Like, that's where we're at.
Even if I didn't have the videos of Biden on there that I do, just the fact that I'm a white male, before any of that, I was constantly attacked on that. Oh, because I'm white and I have tattoos, all of a sudden I'm a fucking neo-Nazi? Like, get out of here with your bullshit. You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
some of the most vicious and judgmental people is due to ignorance and lack of education, to be honest. That's like 90% of people who hated Donald Trump, even in my family. They couldn't give me any valid reason other than, well, my grandmother did. My grandmother told me she didn't like him because he filed bankruptcy back in like 1980 something. Which, okay, cool. You know, that's your valid reason. I can respect that. But
that's at least a fact.
yeah, exactly. And you know, that's what I told him. I'm like, give me one valid reason. It's almost like I could give you 50 valid reasons of positive things he did that no other president in the last 30 years has done. I was like, and then just to mention, like, not even like, yes, it was great that he went to North Korea, made peace, all that. No one's ever been able to do that. But he's done more for the black community alone than the last 5 presidents combined. And that's just a fact. He's done more to try and clean up our footprint in the oceans, everything else. I think it was something like, what was it, like $10 million he donated to the cause just to clean up our oceans. Like, when he went into office, he was a billionaire. He came out having 2/3 less money because he didn't take a paycheck. All of his paychecks from the office went to charities. Like, he actually did stuff for America. Granted, yes. Is he arrogant? Yes. Is he? But I hate to say it this way, but in a way, like, that's America. Americans are fucking arrogant. I don't care if you're Republican, Democrat. Every American is entitled in some way and arrogant. It's not like we live in Ethiopia where you got to fight for water. Like, you're very coddled, and it's very much about consumption. You know what I mean?
Yeah, 100%. And honestly, it's interesting because I when I was talking with my aunt and like Trump came up and I was like, he's an asshole. He's probably like the biggest asshole in politics. But I only say that sort of just to address the fact that he's willing to push buttons and be mean and challenge preconceived notions. But to me, an asshole is someone who's either fake and trying to be good, or someone who is doing something intentionally badly, like you're actually talking someone down, trying to demean them.
Yeah.
Maybe in a couple of instances, you could say he started to get into that kind of bullying, like talking about that one chick who had plastic surgery or something like that. Like stuff like that, you could say he got a little mean. But I only even try to say he was an asshole, just sort of like as a people-pleasing exercise a little bit, like not really, but kind of. Because it's like, who fucking cares?
Yeah.
So what? So what if he was an asshole? If 45 million black Americans are much wealthier, much healthier, much more safe than they were before, but he said some things that can be perceived as mean, I think Trump, a lot of people are confused because they like Trump obviously knows how to sell himself, could have known how to try to handle things in the most seamless way possible and just been like a salesman or whatever. I think he could have pulled that off. And there's this like, well, he was his biggest enemy. People voted against Trump, not for Biden and all this stuff. And I'm like, the system turned out in full force to come against this man, to manipulate every perception we have about him. And like, he didn't do anything that bad, and he did a tremendous amount of good. And so, I mean, I'm almost like past the point of even wanting to acknowledge that, what you think is an asshole, he kind of acted like a few times. Like, that's really like how I feel about it. Because I used to just be more deferential to that. And now I'm like, was he an asshole? Yeah. I think Trump chose to act like a boss, which means acting in the way that gets the best out of his employees, not that looks the best. And that's so different. And so we should toughen the fuck up a little bit. Who cares if we have an asshole as president? Like, who cares? Why does that matter?
Do you want a pushover as a president that's going to fucking roll over? Or do you want somebody who's going to make noise and fucking progress? You know what I mean? And that's the thing. Even if he did say or do a couple things that weren't politically correct, he's fucking human. Look at all the shit that Biden's doing right now, and everybody's like, oh, leave the poor man alone, his health, his mental wellness, blah, blah, blah. Well, where the fuck was this 4 years ago? You know what I mean? Nobody gave a shit about mental health or awareness for the president or that he was human then. They just wanted to attack him from every side that he couldn't look in a direction without being accosted for it. It was sad.
Yeah. 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 And I think it's what is good. We have about 20 seconds before Instagram cuts it off at an hour, so we'll just have to
That's
get off
fine.
and get right back on. But
That's fine.
we'll just do that because I'll lose it if I
All right,
just try to say it now.
Give me like 3 minutes. I'm gonna use the restroom and then I'll jump right back on.
Yeah. No